It's my great pleasure to welcome Francisco Bravo, Senior Director of Supply Chain at Audi Mexico, to the stage.
Hola. Thank you. How are you today? I hope after the launch, I am not going to make you a little bit sleepy. Since we are all in logistics, we all feel a little bit like a voodoo doll. Aren't we? Every day we get pinched like 10,000 times with bad news. So I don't know how you manage that, but in my case, we were trying to apply everything I learned from 17 years in IT to the supply chain, and honestly, it is not easy, but it is. Finally, the most important factor that we learned in the past 12 months is how do we apply methods and new technology into the human being so that we can change our supply chain. And let me start telling you how do we pretend to future-proof Audi Mexico supply chain and also be part of a bigger group of supply chain for the whole brand Audi in this regard. So I jumped too quick. Let me share with you some interesting results of what we have done in the last 12 months. Even though we were living in this very difficult situation, as I mentioned, voodoo doll kind of living and day by day working, if you take out all the semiconductor effects that we have across the supply chain, we were able still to achieve an increase of around about 4% in our sequencing maintenance in the per chain of our products week by week. So there has been weeks where we keep our per chain by around about 97%. So Audi Mexico is becoming one of the top in the group with this specific KPI. And this has been helping us and to stabilize the operation of our suppliers and our service suppliers as well. So to keep certain level of predictability, which is very important for us in how do we manage supply chain. Of course, we increased the volume despite all the problems in the last year. But at the same time, we were trying and we achieved to increase our transport utilization by 10%. I will explain you how. We were speeding up our internal processes, our internal flow of material. We were also improving our circulation time in our ports. And this is, for me, very important KPI because we were able, discounting the semiconductor effect, to reduce almost by 40 days the time from when we receive an order from a customer to the moment we deliver the car for the ports. So this is one of the most important parts in the customer and order to delivery process, and we were able to improve the timing by 40%, and I will explain you why. The next one is, and the most important KPI in this case that right now in Audi we are tracking, is the total cost of our supply chain, including personnel, general expenses, maintenance cost, transport cost, and everything. At the end of the day, we were able to achieve within the last 12 months an optimization of almost 11%. Our supply chain is now more effective and more cost-effective than ever before. How do we achieve this? VUCA, that you have learned and we read in every magazine and in every book, is now, in my point of view, like a kindergarten level 1, because we are in a situation like Norton Jasper wrote some years ago, when a firefly flaps the wings, a breeze goes around the globe. But now, this is reality as not only a breeze, it's a hurricane. If something happens in China, if the Suez Canal is blocked, you know what happened. We all get more gray hair, we all get gastritis, we all get all kind of problems because the effects of some small disruptions in our supply chain create major problems for us that needs to be solved immediately. So what is the most important part and what is the most important thing? Some of you will say transparency in the supply chain. Some of you might say integrated systems. Some of you might say a lot of things. But we read in the news day by day, especially in Europe, in some other countries, that people drive into rivers because they were following GPS instructions. And it's not a joke. It happens. People take decisions based on systems because we get used to it. And now we are all digitalized, and we forget what is digitalizing our companies. Digitalizing sometimes is understood as putting the most innovative technology in one specific process, and let me tell you, from real experience, we were integrating in production control one of the most innovative technologies in the world, and our people were not using it. And the people were not using it because they were afraid, because they didn't know what to do with it, they didn't understood what processes are behind, and they didn't understood how the technology was working. So then I changed a little bit the paradigm. I was starting, and with these 3 examples, I want to show you that the main objective in these 3 examples was to change people's mindset. Because you cannot digitalize any process, and you cannot digitalize any company unless the people understand the processes. Because digitalizing is not just putting the newest technology on top. It is really turning your processes into data that you can analyze and that you can use, even if it is in Excel. So let me talk about the first example. In the first example, we were using data correlation. We were using intelligent KPIs, and I will come back to that concept. We were integrating KPIs in a cross-functional way, and let me give you an example. Our container yard was always in green because we have a space. So if we have 50% of the space occupied, we are in green because our KPIs was settled in this way. But our invested capital, our inventory levels were in red because we were having too much material. So how come 2 KPIs related to the same thing, the amount of material that you have in the plant, are showing 2 different traffic lights? So we starting putting these traffic lights together. So we start putting people together, and we start breaking silo thinking. I started creating meetings where all these 3 people sit together and then define just one KPI that measures everything. And that seems to be easy to do, but it's very difficult because you have to change the mindset. But doing this is the way we were able to also optimize our truck utilization, because we were measuring also in a separate KPI what is our warehouse utilization. And then we were considering, if my warehouse is this level of full and I keep bringing trucks in this level of utilization, then I will fill up my warehouse and that's fine. No, that's wrong. So we were trying really to correlate what is the best leverage of occupancy of my trucks to have the best level of inventory and stocks in my warehouse. And by correlating to that, we thought, because that is the first impression, of course, because everybody's going to say, but now you are bringing less material, now you are bringing less occupancy in the trucks. Exactly the opposite happened. People start thinking, how do we optimize the flow in terms that I bring my transport to the fullest, and we are over 90% last week, and how do we still keep the levels of my inventory and my stocks level to the optimum? We are preparing now for the launch of the new car, and we needed around about 35,000 square meters in warehouse. Of course, it was a challenge, but we decided, let's go for it, and let's optimize our stock levels so that we cover that deficit in area by ourselves in our existing warehouse. And guess what? We achieved it. There is now a very small deficit that we will cover with specific measurements in the plan that will help us to achieve this goal. The second topic is how do we do front loading? How do we anticipate problems? We know that using the port of Veracruz, we are very dependent of weather. And what we did is to calculate the probability that in a certain period of the year, we have not achieved our vessel cycle, and what is the probability that that vessel goes out of the month. And we calculate the worst case, and based on that worst case, we made our forecast. And then based on that worst case, we were able to plan better our logistic internally to get out the cars to the ports. And by doing that, we save money. And by doing that, we were able to maximize the utilization. And right now, we are almost delivering in just in time our cars to the port for the moment when they have to go to the vessel. So this is a major breakthrough by anticipating the possibility of issues that we will have. And finally, is how do we use data across different processes? We start doing micro data mining from one system and another system because we were using legacy systems. And legacy systems, let me tell you, don't talk to each other. So we needed to pull out pieces of information. But if I try to download the whole database of a SAP system to make a data analysis, I will never reach it. So we will try to identify, first of all, what our top offenders in each single case were, how do we correlate this data, which is the data that I need specifically to do that analysis, and based on that analysis, we create a specific data mining, but also, and most important, I start working with my people in different methods and methodologies that they were not aware that they were using. Agile methods is a very basic, let's say, methodology in the IT world. But if I try to create a training in agile methods for all my people, the first thing that I will achieve is resistance. So what I did is to create a digital OneNote, yes, OneNote, Microsoft OneNote, shop floor KPI dashboard, so that the people start thinking in agile. We were tracking all the top offenders, creating measurements, doing follow-up, making retrospective, and all the parts of the agile methodology in a very simple tool. The people didn't know that they were using it, but now they use it, and now they do it permanently. So we were trying to create the methodology, the culture, the ritual, to change the willingness of the people to work different. And by doing these small projects and small approaches from the digitalization world, I am trying to create a new culture, I am trying to create awareness, and we are achieving results based on these basic steps I just mentioned to you. Thank you very much. The human factor is the most important part in innovation, and we are all here together to think how the world is going to be in the next few years, but we cannot do it with the human factor. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Paco. That was fantastic, very insightful, and a really genuinely unique perspective on your approach to advancing Audi supply chain.
Thank you very much.
Maybe just a quick couple of questions from me. I'll open it to the audience as well, and we'll be continuing with a panel with some other experts as well, so questions welcome throughout. But maybe just if I can start, interesting to understand how you determine and prioritize your KPIs that you showed, perhaps in such an environment that is so dynamic, so volatile, so fluid. How did you prioritize, and how did you kind of continuously measure?
We have created, for instance, we are now in the automation strategy. So we were trying to identify the sweet spots of technology at the moment. What is the most innovative technology at the moment? And from this radar, when we identify some sweet spots of technology that we want to use, then we analyze in which kind of processes can this sweet spots of technology be used, but also then we calculate in which of these processes will we have the most high return of investment and the quicker return of investment to create also this love for technology. Because otherwise, if you don't bring the result in terms of money, if you don't bring the results in terms of the people feeling that the technology is helping them, then you don't get the organization to work on it. And therefore, these are the two main steps. So we identified the sweet spot, the business case, and of course, in which top offenders in your processes you have to use it.
Okay, and based on that, how do you see your priorities shaping up for 2023? As you look ahead, will they stay the same, or will it continue to evolve and might prioritize other parts of the business?
It will be very dynamic. I think data mining is going to be our headache for the next couple of years because we need to extract data to be able to analyze it quickly. We need to start working in artificial intelligence. So how do we predict events and how do we use the data that we generate to create new opportunities, new business models, and new processes in our companies?
Oh, fantastic.
Or how do we change them?
Yeah, of course. And lots to unpack, but thank you again, Paco. And I want to introduce my other guests, and we'll continue the conversation. So please take a seat.
Thank you very much.
So it brings me great pleasure to introduce my other guests to the stage. With 20 years experience in real-time asset location technology and responsible for his current company's product vision, roadmap, new feature development and commercialization, Adrian Jennings, Chief Product Officer at Cognosos. Please come on up. Next up, I'd like to welcome my next guest with 20 years experience in global supply chain leadership, including with companies such as Ryder and XPO Logistics. Just started his new role as President of Managed and Dedicated Transportation at RXO, a very recent offshoot of XPO, technology-led logistics provider. Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
And last, again, certainly not least, a leader in digital transportation management systems, driven by his own personal experience working for logistics providers, founded his own enterprise software company in 2013, been going from strength to strength ever since, offering software as a service to bridge the technology gap between shippers and carriers. I'd like to welcome Wiebe, CEO and founder of Cargobase. Great, well, welcome gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining. So I want to get straight into it, perhaps feeding off Paco's presentation, but how much are today's extremes in terms of volatility, disruption, driving transformation in the industry? It's quite a broad question, but is it fundamental to digitalisation, the current world that we live in? Perhaps I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's a massive change going on in terms of the new generation or the revived generation of supply chain managers and logistics managers that require to work more efficiently, are willing to work more efficiently, are open to change in their processes, open to change how they collaborate and work with their partners in a more transparent way as well. And technology is going to help there significantly, and we're seeing it on a day-to-day basis, especially where we're seeing a lot of large companies that are looking for changes, not just for the impact on the long term, but especially on the impact on the short term as well. So making small steps with small wins that eventually become very big wins in big organizations.
Yeah, which is clearly something that that Paco highlighted. You mentioned the short term versus the long term. Paul, perhaps I can get your perspective here. In terms of software systems, problem solving. From your perspective in your customer base, are you seeing more of a short-term focus to address the critical challenges the industry is being faced, or is there a longer-term approach towards technology?
Yeah, great question. I definitely think it's longer term. if you look at the disruptions that we faced, and who could have known coming out of the pandemic, you know, all the different types of things, and we could spend the rest of this panel just kind of listing off, you know, the voodoo doll type things. I love that analogy that we've all been pinched with. But I think there's definitely an immediate short-term response, and how can technology help that? But I think all of us in this room and at the executive levels, they want to figure out how do we prevent that happening from in the future. And so you talk about what the future proof would be. I think we're looking for long-term technology to help with that. And if you go back just even 10 or 15 years, when we talked about technology in the supply chain, we really were referencing more just systems. What was someone's TMS or WMS, and how did we utilize those? The change that we're seeing now is how do we digitalize and bring that technology really as a layer over the entire supply chain? How do we have that to be something not only from the planning, the execution piece, how do we bring it into risk management, and then as you talked about from the data intelligence, how do we go back and utilize that really for ongoing improvement and continuous improvement?
Yeah, excellent. And Adrian, perhaps coming to you with an impressive history of or experience gained in asset tracking. How has the technology changed? But also, I guess more importantly for this question, how has the expectation of that technology changed from your customers?
Yeah, and I think partly that stems from the last question as well, short-term versus long-term. What I've seen over the years is a lot of long-term solutions kind of becoming inculcated in the way the business is done and kind of overlooked. And I think the pandemic and the supply chain issues shone a light to the point where you had to take a short-term reaction to fix what is effectively a long-term problem. It's been a problem for a while. It's going to be a problem going forward without the solutions. And the technology solutions that have been available, why has this been a black hole for so long that people have not really tried to fix, is there have been some very cumbersome technologies that have kind of been shoehorned into these applications. They've failed in a lot of ways to create a really compelling ROI. And some of them are fairly long in the tooth these days. You know, the advent of the technologies that I'm in was the late 90s, and some of the solutions out there have been around for 15 years. So what's changed is a new level of demand based on the situation that we're in, coupled with a new generation of technologies that are making use of tools that weren't available to the technology startup of the late 90s, things like the cloud, things like AI that really are coming into their own right now and making a big impact and a really substantial ROI.
Interesting, and perhaps sticking with on ROI, Paco, are you seeing a shift in terms of what you're being encouraged to implement and drive? You have a wealth of experience in IT functions and IT leadership roles within the automotive sector. Boardroom level now becoming more accepting of the willingness to invest, the willingness to take risk when it comes to digitalization technology.
As I was mentioned, you have to convince them. So if you have the proper business case, and if you can show that the technology that we are trying to implement is going to bring you something for the business, it is easy to sell, let's say, it's easy to present, but you have to bring the right technology to the right spot, because otherwise, then you have a very large amount of money put it into an investment that at the end of the day is not going to bring you what you're expecting, and then you are losing for the future. And if we take again the long-term perspective, you have to be very careful in which kind of technology you put your money in, so that you bring these short-term, low-hanging fruits, so that everybody is buying it, no? From the people who is using it up to the highest level in the organization.
Yeah, interesting. I also want to involve the audience here. So, quick show of hands, who has a smartphone? Nobody. Come on, people, don't lie to me. Okay. Right, so I'd like to do an audience poll, and all you need to do to take part is have a smartphone. So if my colleagues can put up the poll, I'd like to just ask a very simple question. In which area will digitalization have the biggest impact? So you just need to get your QR scanner, and we'll leave that up running for a couple of minutes, and we'll be able to track the results. Choices are inbound logistics, finished vehicle logistics, aftermarket and service parts, or end-to-end supply chain. Whilst our audience figures out the technology themselves, and we compile the results, Paco, I want to come to you first, because you have responsibility for the full supply chain activities at Audi Mexico. What would your answer be here?
My answer will be number 4, because as I mentioned, so long we have been working a lot in the supply chain in silos, and we have to start taking more end-to-end processes into consideration and digitalizing across the different processes in the supply chain, because this is what brings the money into the pocket. And therefore, what we have to identify is these pieces of end-to-end processes across the supply chain to be optimized and to be digitalized.
Okay, great. Well, let's have a quick look and see if you were correct.
Fantastic.
There's no such thing as a wrong answer, but clearly...
I got the tequila for the night.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe they were influenced by your answer, but opening it up to the rest of the panel, does this surprise you, or from your perspectives? Adrian, I'll come to you.
No, I don't think it does. I mean, I think one of Paco's interesting insights in the presentation was the cross-functional KPIs. Because one of the things that honestly was an amazing innovation but started killing the supply chain was the whole concept of lean, which was a very siloed kind of concept. And you end up with situations like you had, where you have KPIs that actually fight each other. And leaning out the supply chain is fantastic, and the head of supply chain gets a Christmas bonus and everybody goes home happy, except for the fact that you starve the assembly line and now you're not making as many cars as you did because your supply chain was leaned out so much. So I think the big revolution in digitization is the realization that it's a holistic problem, that you can't treat any one piece of the supply chain separately than the other, because it's upstream and downstream, every link in the chain affects the others around it.
Okay. And any thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It's definitely number 4. I agree with what Paco says of how fragmented and siloed, even within our own supply chain and own companies can be. And I have examples that I can just think of, even on the inbound production side, where a company will, the premium freight piece is almost completely separate from the milk runs or the JIT piece of business, and they're competing. And then even on the aftermarket side, we have a large OEM partner that we've worked with for some time. I won't call them out by name, but on their aftermarket side, they almost take pride that they use one provider planning all their inbound and another provider that does the outbound on the aftermarket. And we've talked to them about the loss of synergy, not talking end-to-end supply chain, just within their own aftermarket division, they're not even finding that. So I do think when you look to the technology and where we'll go, it has to be an end-to-end supply chain solution that will help drive. I have a large team that manages premium freight, and oftentimes, we're sending air charters for very small parts, where the reality is, had they worked with other divisions, that part may be available in their aftermarket network somewhere, but they're utilizing air charters because they're so siloed just within the inbound piece of business.
Excellent. And Wiebe, I'm going to have to force you to disagree.
Yeah, no, I think
I'm afraid.
I think they're all also very linked to each other, right? But it's it's also the supply chain, the digitalisation supply chain solutions, right? Because there are different solutions that could fall in different silos as well. So how do they communicate? How do they talk to each other? How is the data being used, and how is the collaboration internally as well? And I think a lot of large organizations have a massive challenge with that as well, and how they actually get everybody aligned with the same objectives and the same goals. So I think that's probably a big challenge if you want to have the end-to-end
Yeah, of course. And perhaps, or maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but perhaps a bit of a paradox in terms of the vast majority saying full end-to-end supply chain, but we've already talked about the small sort of bite-sized chunks in terms of that making a real impact and a real difference at a kind of a real granular level. So I understand that they form an important piece of the end-to-end supply chain puzzle, but clearly within each silo, within each sector, there's gains to be said. And if anyone did disagree from the audience and choose inbound finished vehicles, then please put up your hand. We'd love to hear from you as well. So, visibility, we're shedding light across the supply chain, but are there still dark spots? Are there still areas that are lagging behind? And perhaps Adrian, I'll come to you here.
I mean, yeah, from our perspective, we see a dark spot. We focus on the yard management. That might be the outbound finished vehicle yard, the VPC, the port, or equally the inbound side. There's a lot of investment in TMS and transportation management systems to get over-the-road tracking, say, of loads on trucks. The yard is often the black hole, and often people will refer to it actually as the black hole. That the paradox is that you can have supply chain visibility across the globe, but you lose track of everything right when it hits the fence line. And between the fence and the dock on the inbound side, and between the end of the line and the fence again on the outbound side, there's a huge gap in visibility there, and a very underserved, from a technological standpoint, a very underserved application in terms of the technologies that have been not particularly successfully tried in the past. So yeah, that we see a big black hole in the yard for sure.
Interesting. So solutions and tools are offering access to data increasingly in real time, raising the ability to have real-time visibility of the network. But I'm interested to understand how your organizations are truly sort of utilizing this ability. It's a great thing to have, but if we don't know what to do with it and we don't use it in the right way, Paco, you're nodding, so I'm going to come to you. And what does real-time data really mean for you, and what does it enable you to do?
For me, the most important data is to have maybe not real-time, but the data that you need to take decision with when something or some process goes wrong. Because normally, and I think everybody know, we always plan for the perfect process, for the should-be process. And whenever it goes wrong, and the pandemic has taught us that a lot of things can go wrong, from weather to diseases and pandemics and everything. So, and you don't have available the data that you need to take a final decision on something extremely important, that is when it hurts. And that is the reason why we have to be careful which set of data you choose, and you have to start thinking on what can go wrong. I put the example of what we did with Veracruz and what we did with our outbound part, because this is very, very plastic example of you have to plan for when the things are not going as you plan. And you need to have the data available, even though they are coming from different systems. Might not be necessary to have real data, because it's expensive, it creates a lot of amount of resources that you need, but also to have identify what is the right information that you need in case something goes wrong.
So I have a name for this. For a long time, I've kind of thought of automotive manufacturing as a plan and pray industry, which we plan to the nth degree and then pray that nothing goes wrong. And for a while, digitization, talked about digitization was really about systems, but a lot of it was about planning systems as well. And we got really good at planning. But the hard part is, well, number one, the visibility to know when something has gone wrong or is about to go wrong. But it's the replanning in real time piece. And I think that's like the hammer blow that the supply chain took. It works great if everything runs at steady state. I mean, if it runs, as soon as you start to make perturbations, that's when things go wrong. And that's when you need that resilience and that real-time kind of flexibility of decision-making. So I think that's where the visibility comes in. It has to be real-time enough that you can replan for your less than optimal situation that you're facing right now.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I would say, just as Adrian said, we were very proud of our plan for every part PFVP process for years, which if everything goes as planned, that's great that you have a PFVP. But as you've just said, when there's disruptions or things go off the rail, then that's when chaos happens and everyone forgets about systems and data and digitalization, and they're like, we just need it here and we need it here now. But I do think what you're seeing in this next evolution is how the technology can empower us. And to go back to your question about the data, an earlier panel even mentioned this, just having the data without being able to know how to utilize the data, how to drive into the details behind that. So I think there's really two key factors with the data. I think one is it has to be consumable. How do you consume that? One of the ways that we are doing that is really just through the smartphone technology. Just as you put a QR code up, and we had almost 100 people answer your poll question a few minutes ago, through creations of apps like our RXO, formerly XPO app, we have over 800,000 downloads now, which is amazing to me. It just shows that people want it in a consumable format, and it has to be something that empowers the user as well. Just giving them the data without being able to empower them, have something actionable on that. I think those are two key factors in data. It has to be consumable, and it needs to empower the individual that's working through that.
And then I'd just add one thing. I think we talked about, passive solutions earlier but it has to be consumable, deliverable, but it has to be delivered in the workflow, in the context of the workflow, and without having to go seek it out as well. A perfect technological solution serves up to me in the moment exactly the nugget of data that I needed to know based on what I was about to do next. It anticipates what I was going to do, and Google does that for me. My precious Google phone tells me exactly when to leave the house in the morning because there's traffic on the interstate and I've got a flight booked. But that's true, valuable digital data, right? It knows what I'm about to do, and it serves up exactly what I need to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, for Wiebe, for your customers and I guess for the wider industry, is there an important education piece here about how to utilize the data, how to use it? We talked about offering real time, whether it's real time or not. There's just massive and exponential amount of data becoming available. So how do you, as the provider of that data, support your customers in terms of interpreting it?
We help them by training. I think what Paco said about it's all about the humans, that how to use it, willing to change. I think the change management is necessary, because if you can have a lot of systems in place, but if things go different than they're supposed to do, and everybody goes back to Excel and email, then the data is not real time. There's no data at all, right? And so it's the quality of data as well, how you collect it, and how to use it. And I think internally a lot of companies can train people as well on how to use the data on a day-to-day basis and how to improve their processes, because I think there's a massive opportunity also basically for companies to work with one single source of truth, in terms of they're relying a lot on data provided by external parties rather than actually having their own data, and keep on reviewing that process and keeping on challenging what they've done in the past as well, because processes that were maybe put in place 5 years ago are maybe not applicable anymore, and there might be data elements that were collected or are collected on a day-to-day basis, but if nobody uses it, then why is it still being collected, right? So we need to work more efficient and more productive as well, because we're being challenged all the time.
Excellent, yeah. So management by exception is considered best practice in many instances. We've talked about, we've touched upon that best case scenario, planning for that, and perhaps the ability to adapt plans in real time, as Adrian, you mentioned. But I'm interested perhaps in scenario planning tools and technology. And Paco, I'll come to you in terms of, are you exploring this? Are you implementing this? Are you looking at best, worst, middle case when it comes to all scenarios within your operations?
Absolutely. For our production program, what we are doing right now is we have like 3 possible scenarios for every production week, so that we see if this happens, then we are able to react in this way. Because everything comes up with this hyperlinked complexity that I was talking about. It's like a spider web. If you move this string, then the others are going to be completely broken. So imagine that you have to manage the capacities of the suppliers, the capacities on the plant, the restrictions, the technical restrictions of your production, versions and everything, capacities of your transport and so on. So you have to create the scenarios in advance, no? Dieter Braun, the head of supply chain, was putting the example, you don't let the firemen to come into a fire without any plan. So you have to plan in advance, because otherwise the kid is burning inside the plant and the house, and you don't know what to do. So we have to plan scenarios in advance. What is the most probable, then will come up with the time, and then you have to do the fine-tuning afterwards. But at the end of the day, you have to have this in advance, prior to the crisis happening. And this is what we learned from the pandemic and all the situation that we are living day by day now.
But I mean, I do that. So that is predicated on the best, worst, middle case is definitely predicated on a pretty good understanding of the process flow and what it's supposed to be. And I always it's kind of a joke, but it's not a joke that we kind of sell our solutions with a health warning. What do? We help people. We talked about the yard, visualize the process, understand the flow of trailers and vehicles and parts through the process, to help them, optimize and make decisions in real time. But without that visibility, there's a lot of processes you don't actually know what's happening in there. It's a bit of a black hole. So the first step of visibility, and it's always a little bit shocking. We're part technology provider and part counseling service, because it's kind of shocking to say, well, what the heck? That is not exactly how our process is designed. Why is it running that way? So you can do those scenario analyses, but it starts with actually understanding how the process is flowing today.
Yeah, but our cases and scenarios are based not on the best, most probable, and worst is from the worst one, worst two, and worst three.
That's about right, yeah.
We've talked about tools and technology creating massive amounts of data. Paul, I'm interested to come to you. RXO is a technology-led logistics provider. And you talked about significant numbers downloading your app and starting to utilize your technology. How does the industry interpret the gaining amounts of tools and technologies, the increasing amounts of tools and technologies available, especially in a day and age where perhaps we're starting to see car makers and tier suppliers start to utilize more and more providers, more tools, more technology from different companies. So are we getting to a point where the ecosystem is starting to become overfilled with platforms, with options?
Well, I think we've definitely been in a kind of a digital boom age, and I think there's a lot of emergence into the marketplace. But I do think that's good. I think that it will challenge and test all the providers. Just as I look at your list of sponsors here for this great event, it's a tremendous amount of people in the industry and companies in the industry who I believe really are using technology to advance and to be able to support either the tiered suppliers or the OEMs in their supply chain. What makes me cringe at times is when, and I hear a CEO of one of the large OEMs declare that they are no longer an automotive company, they're going to be a technology company. And I understand that, right? We talked this morning in the economic update about electric vehicles and where that's going, and the number of chips that are in each vehicle is amazing to me. That truly is technology. My concern and my caution would be for any tiered suppliers or OEMs that feel they want to go build that piece of supply chain expertise out. There's a lot of companies that are listed here who have spent billions of dollars across those companies in bringing that technology to play. So I think what you'll see and what you'll continue to see is that utilizing the best potential providers that you have to understand how that technology services you. And I truly think, just as we have at RXO, the best solutions are the cutting edge technology that's really backed by the years of expertise too. Because there's a lot of entrants that can just bring the technology to play, but if they don't have they're not backed by the expertise behind that, then at times that technology can be just useless. And I think we'll see over the next decade, you'll see new entrants into the marketplace, you'll see where that technology will prevail. But I think some of these startups will likely either be gobbled up, or you'll find that they don't provide the value to the marketplace and won't be able to succeed.
And Paco, I mean, just building on that, how do you decide how do you decide on whether you build something in-house, whether you use off-the-shelf support from providers, and how do you blend them and manage the complexity of having multiple systems, multiple providers, not least when you're incorporating them into legacy systems within Audi as well?
Right now, what we are doing is also basing these decisions based on the availability of the resources that we have. because we belong to a bigger group and we try to standardize as processes and systems as much as possible. But having 120 plants all over the world, you cannot create a rollout plan which fits 120 plants this big with this complexity all at the same time. So we have to start taking decisions based on the case-by-case situation and also the availability of the resources, because the availability of know-how in some spots of technology is very limited. So we have to take the decision whether we take something off the shelf which might be more return of investment attractive from that point of view, and then to decide whether we do it by ourselves, and then how and which amount of resources we put, and where do we put these resources. I was part of the organization of the Volkswagen IT services, and we grounded the company in India and also in Portugal. So this is part of the strategy. Where do you put which resources to have a follow the sun strategy for support in other topics, considering how the availability of your specific know-how is at the moment.
Excellent. Wiebe, I want to come to you in terms of future-proofing your own technology so that you can continue to offer, the cutting-edge technology, the right technology.
Yeah.
How do you continue to innovate, and how do you see what's coming and what's going to be needed by customers and by the industry?
So I think what we've done, so we started 10 years ago. We started as a procurement platform only for time-critical logistics, and then we listened to what the industry wanted, then we became a spot-buy-freight platform, and we became a tracking platform, and now we're full-fledged TMS based on not what I wanted 10 years ago, but what the industry actually wanted. And I think that's also key to keep on evolving, and we keep on doing that. We just made a massive investment in our product team. We're currently working on a freight benchmarking and more intelligence for our customers based on market indexes, etc. So keeping on very connected to the customers itself, and really understand what the challenges are, not only from a senior management, but especially also on the logistics operations side. Because why do a lot of people still use Excel and email? Why do they not use technology that is already out available? Are they afraid to change? Do they not want to change? Are they being held back by management or anything like that? So I think that's really the key, to keep going on with the discussions and the conversations or the dialogue with the customers, to understand, okay, what do you want, and challenge them as well. And I think that's what I enjoy the most, is just going to all these customers and to the plans and listen to what they want and challenge that. Is it key priority? Is it nice to have? Because there's so many technology providers out there, and there's so much smoke and mirrors that actually a lot of people have no clue anymore what's really actually going to help them. Yeah. With our no-nonsense approach, we just say, this is what we do, this is what you need, and it's up to you if you think that will benefit you, yes or no. So I think it's the mindset of the customers as well, to be very open and share and be able to be challenged, be able to accept the challenge from providers like Cargobase to be open to change the process as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and you touched upon the human factor again, and Paco, you mentioned right at the beginning, well, in your presentation, that's a critical, fundamental element. I'm keen to hear from other panelists in terms of the importance of that educational piece, but how do we get past that resistance to change, to get past that fear factor of potentially losing a job to automation, to robotics, that typically is associated with digitalisation and new technology. Adrian, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think our focus is very much on helping people do their jobs better. There's a huge amount of scope to do that. There's just jobs that humans are better doing than automation, and it's any job that requires any judgment, and just about every link in the supply chain requires some level of judgment at times. So I don't see it as a threat, but I understand why it's perceived that way. And I think that the critical piece, it's not just the initial training, it's not just developing solutions that that speak exactly to the problem of the individual, that they would look at and say, my day will be better if I use this. You know, I'll give you a silly example of, not a silly, it's a very important example, but it's a small thing, just giving a truck driver an app so he knows exactly where his 12 or 14 vehicles are that he's got to load up on his truck so that he can be in and out as fast as possible. That is a massive improvement in that guy's day. He may be able to run an extra load that day if he can get on and off the site that quickly. So it's not just about developing the solutions like that create that just very individual, meaningful value, but also staying engaged. I think there's been a time when technology was kind of much more of a capital purchase, you know, a sell and a toss over the fence and run away and try to win the next deal. A lot of people in the industry are moving to much more of a SaaS-based model now. We do that, and we do that for one very important reason, is we stay engaged with our customers. And so there's a continual process of making sure that the solution's being used to its fullest potential, that people understand what it's there for. Your sponsor that originally brought it into the company gets promoted and moved on, and somebody moves into his position who doesn't really know what this thing is that they've inherited. So I think it's technology vendors are evolving now to much more of a long-term relationship rather than here's a widget we can sell you and good luck, that should improve your process.
And in terms of skills, training, you know, development of employees, and Paco, perhaps I'll come to you first on this. You know, you talked about how you use I believe you call it micro mining or data mining, and you used sort of techniques that people didn't realize that they were being starting to adopt the technology. Is there you know, we're seeing a shift in terms of approaches and adoption between generations. The next generation is very much open to the use of technology and reliant on it, perhaps even, whereas older generations, which will play a critical part within the workforce because of their experience, perhaps there's a different tact needed there. So how are you kind of approaching that from an upskilling and labor perspective?
From the size of organizations that we are used to have, or that we will have in the future as well, is so big and so diverse that you need to have them all. So you need to have more quick solutions, and more, you will have younger people who is easy to adapt technology, but you will still keep generations like me, that I belong now to the oldest generation, at least in Audi Mexico, and that we are a little bit more resistant to start learning how to program and so on. But that is exactly the point. So you have to have the whole palette of offering. And going to your point as well, if you want to show what technology can do for you, you have to make it available at the level of knowledge that every people has. And you have to make it easier for them. And you have to show them that maybe you are driving now the truck by hand and pushing the levers and so on. But in the future, you might be driving a truck from your phone. So, and it's fun too, no? You have to bring all the nice things about it, because you can make bigger screens, and if you are older enough that you need a little bit of help to see through the screen, maybe you have better opportunities to do it by using technology. So you have to have the whole offering for all the groups of people that you will have, and you will keep having in your organizations from now to the future, because this will never change.
We've talked about digitalisation in a very positive light, not quite the silver bullet. There's certainly plenty of opportunities, but perhaps the other side of this is, as we race to adopt technology, perhaps we don't fully understand. Are we putting supply chains at risk, and is cybersecurity the next potential major threat for supply chains and logistics moving forward? Wiebe, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, so last year, so I'm not a tech guy, but it's very, I think it's very important. And there are a lot of processes, all the certifications, the ISOs, etc., on our side as well, to processes in place to ensure that cyber attacks don't happen, and we protect our customers' data as with all the things and tools that we can use, right? And that becomes better as well, better visible, and better ways for us to manage that as well, and to be more transparent. So if we are certified by ISO and and other certification bodies, then it's much easier to become working with these companies as well, because for a lot of companies, the amount of Excel sheets that we have to fill out to in terms of all the requirements, etc., it's immense, and it's understandable, because it is of course a risk, and there are things that could happen, but you can minimize it to as much as possible, right? So yeah, that's basically what we're trying to do.
Yeah, because we have seen some fairly high-profile cybersecurity attacks for some major players in the industry this year that have halted production, caused major disruption, and even in Mexico here very recently, I believe the Secretariat of Infrastructure and Communications and Transportation was hit by a cyber attack, which impacted its ability to issue new driving license and permits, which is not helping the situation of the shortage that we're facing. So, yeah, I'm just keen to kind of just explore that just a little bit further in terms of, and perhaps Paul, I'll get your perspective.
Yeah, I think your question was, is this the next thing we have to face? It's not the next thing, it is now, it's immediate, it's right here. As you've said, there's been some high-profile cyber attacks that have happened in recent months. Hopefully all of y'all have leaders that are keenly aware of this, that are building protection into your systems. It's an important part. I would say, as you analyze any third-party or SaaS provider that you're going to work with, of how are you protected in that? And you know, I just think of the impact of a line going down for an hour. Now you talk about impacting the line for potentially days or weeks because of a cyber attack. It is right here, it's real, it's now, and I know we are very vigilant, and you know, within our whole organization, and I would encourage all of y'all. It just frustrates me that there's individuals that operate in this way and want to take advantage of weaknesses as we try to improve what we're doing, but it's the reality of the world that we live in today. So hopefully we can all continue to band together, work together, support those friends and other companies that have been attacked on how can we help them when those times come. We shouldn't, I would say, take advantage of that, but we should, as an industry, work together and support one another, because the next day it could be any of us if we don't watch out.
An important message for sure. So we're getting pretty close to time here. So just want to round up maybe with a last question or two. Paco, when you presented, you talked about some examples, some real life improvements in your operations. What are you exploring next, be it in 2023, 2024, for what's the next sort of project, and what have you identified ahead that you're going to see improvements?
I will go for more automation in terms of predictability. So how can we prevent and how do we analyze data to predict what may happen and what might go wrong in the next couple of months in every possible area of the supply chain. This is one of the most important topics I want to explore in the next couple of months. Also trying to get the data out of the legacy systems that we will have and that probably we will not change in the next 5 years, and then how do we use it and how do we link it for the purpose of achieving our goals.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we look forward to the next presentation next year on those interesting topics for sure. Adrian, final thoughts on this session?
Final thoughts, I guess just a word of caution. Technology doesn't solve problems. Better processes solve problems, and technology gives you the opportunity to improve processes. So there has to be a change program associated with any ingestion of new technology. You can't just buy a solution off the shelf and plug it in and switch it on and expect everything to get better. It's a lot bigger than that. So yeah, make sure that you're leveraging technology to improve processes. That's the key.
Excellent. Paul?
Yeah, I think I would build on that as well. And I think for any new technology, the sooner you can have the end users engaged and be a part of that. I think too oftentimes we see large procurement organizations who go out and they buy a technology solution and it just gets shoved down on the end users who really never even knew it was coming. Have those users be a part of the decision process. Have them poke and probe. They're the ones that are going to own it and be a part of it. So it also, I think, helps with the buy-in if you're able to do that in the early stages.
Yeah, some excellent advice. And Wiebe,
Yeah,
to round
100%
things up.
agree with Paul. I think that's key to success is if the end users don't like it, they will not use it. And then it's a waste of money, a waste of effort, right? So, and it should be seen, technology should be seen as a superpower, right? It doesn't, it gives people the opportunity to do other things better. So that's, I think, it's not a threat, it's a massive opportunity.
Yeah. So once again, we're clearly seeing the need and the critical nature of being able to talk between customer, supplier, key stakeholders, collaborating, coming together to really drive meaningful change and ensure that the right technology is adopted, implemented, and utilized to improve the supply chain. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating discussion. Round of applause, please, for my superstar speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.